So first of all, I want to really thank Susan for putting this on, for having me out here. It's a, as I said to multiple people this weekend so far, it's been sort of surreal on this journey that I've been on to have read people's books like Patrick's that I read in my senior year of high school, and then to be rubbing shoulders and consider him a friend now. It's just been wonderfully surreal. So what we're going to do today is going to be a crash course of my particular area of expertise, which is the food taboo. And hopefully after we're finished with this, am I holding the mic? Good, well, okay. Hopefully after we're finished with this, it will be apparent why this is a subject worthy of covering. As I've been very fond of telling people, there's really no elevator pitch for why I felt like this was important. But it's definitely been underexplored. So to sort of start this off, we're going to go through three cases that I think are really exemplary of the sort of phenomenon that I'm talking about. The first one is the story of Jimmy Doyle in the Fairy Palace, who's a gentleman who, according to Patrick Kennedy's Legendary Fictions of the Irish Celts, a book from 1866, was walking down an Irish country lane, probably going to or from the pub, obviously, when he happened upon a castle that had an open door in it. He walked in and he found a sumptuous banquet full of fairy royalty. And while he was welcomed, he was given a tumbler of punch, and he noticed that there was a man who he had recognized as being a deceased neighbor. And this man tells him specifically, "For your life, do not touch bit nor sup." Even though the smell was nice, and obviously being an Irish gentleman, I'm sure it took him great pains into doing this, but he ended up dumping the tumbler between his coat and waistcoat. He did not eat food in the fairyland. He was found asleep in the bushes the next morning, his breath smelling with punch. So you have to wonder exactly if he was actually under the substance of something a lot more mundane. Having said that, in more modern times, we have the story of Albert Osmond, pictured here with Renee de Hendon. Osmond is probably the most famous case of someone who claims to have been abducted by a large hairy hominid, by a Sasquatch. In 1957, he signed an affidavit that said that 33 years prior, he had actually been abducted bodily by a Sasquatch while prospecting in British Columbia. He was taken in his sleeping bag, thrown over the shoulder of the being, and then dumped into a small valley. Once he was there in the small valley, he saw that this Sasquatch was apparently the leader of a family unit. There were several other there. And he was given sweet roots with a satisfying taste while he was being held in this small valley. According to Osmond, they sort of guarded the exits to this particular hollow or wash. And he was only able to escape, interestingly enough, by administering consumables as well. In his pack, in the sleeping bag, he had enough for a setup to make coffee over a campfire. So one day, according to him, he made some coffee over a campfire and actually tricked the father Bigfoot into consuming his snuff box, which sounds horrifying to anyone who's ever been around snuff. And the Sasquatch then supposedly washed it down with steaming hot coffee. That created enough of a distraction for Osmond to escape. Most famous, and probably not at all unfamiliar to everyone here, is the story of Joe Simonton, a chicken farmer from Eagle River, Wisconsin. Simonton in 1961, am I right on that? Yes, 1961, April 18th, was making breakfast in the kitchen of his Eagle River home and claimed to have heard a sound that sounded like radials on wet pavement. He went outside and saw this craft that looked like two domes put together, containing what he claimed were three, I believe, dark-skinned Italians inside, of all things. As you know, I'm sure that Simon, what I said, dark-skinned Italians. Boy, he went out there and he saw that one of them was holding up a silver jug. I can make fun of the Wisconsin accent because Wisconsin's near and dear to me. I actually was there for my undergrad. So, one of them was holding a shining jug aloft, and Simonton, being a good-natured Wisconsinite, made the assumption that they wanted water from him. So he goes outside, and this artist rendering taking this silver jug from the Space Italian, and he comes back out, and as he's making the trade, he notices that there's another Space Italian inside cooking something on a flameless sort of griddle. Simonton said that they look like pancakes. Sometimes you'll alternatively hear them described as cookies. Apparently, the Space Italians noticed Simonton's interest and gave him 4 of these. What's interesting about this, and what makes it probably the most famous case in the sort of material that I'm talking about, is that it is one of the few cases where we actually have some evidence left behind. And Simonton did the right thing. He gave 1 to a local judge, he gave 1 to J. Allen Hynek, he gave 1 to NICAP, and kept 1 for himself. Unfortunately, when examined, these cookies or pancakes, you more commonly hear referred to as pancakes, were deemed to have completely mundane ingredients. Primarily buckwheat flour. There are some persistent rumors that Jimmy Green Beckley told me that supposedly under Wright-Patterson there's a commissary and supposedly there's a glass case there where some of the Simonton pancakes are housed. I have no idea if there's any truth to that, but I love that little thread. What's interesting is to look at this through the lens of fairy food. The Onarbanski are a race of small fairy dwarves on some islands off of the Germanic coast of the Netherlands. And according to lore, the Onarbanski are notorious for stealing children and women, but also help farmers by bringing them fresh water and pancakes to the field. So why is this important? I mean, it seems sort of a silly subject to cover. Typically, in worldwide fairy lore, the taboo that was placed upon the fairies was that if you were to eat with them, if you were to die and share in communion or drink with the fairy folk, you would be trapped in fairyland forever, perhaps even becoming one of them. You have to see these recurring motifs time and again of people who notice dead people or dead deceased loved ones at the fairy banquets. There's a great story from Jane Wilde, Oscar's mother, in her Ancient Legends, Mystic Charms, and Superstitions of Ireland, where a woman, a young girl, meets a fairy prince and descends, as you often do, into the fairy mound. And while there, the prince hands her, again, a tumbler of punch. And again, like the Jimmy Doyle anecdote, she sees someone who says, "Eat no food and drink no wine, for you'll never reach home again if you do." She puts the cup down, but the fae are furious, and they say, "Whoever comes to us must drink with us." Here we have this motif of the food taboo, the idea that perhaps giving food means that you will stay with someone. My light bulb moment, I'll talk to a couple of people about this, but my light bulb moment for this was when I read J. Robert Valley's Raincoat Sasquatch. It's a phenomenal book. Anyone who's interested should pick it up. It talks about Sasquatch lore off of, it's sort of the western coast of Alaska. The legendary lore of the Cutchin tribe says that if you meet the bookwus, which I'm sure it takes a little stretch of imagination to imagine the bookwus translated loosely as the wild man, the woodman, being a Sasquatch. If you meet a bookwus and you accept food from him, you are trapped with him forever, perhaps even becoming a bookwus. Similar beliefs about the sort of food taboo are held by various Native American tribes throughout the U.S. In alien lore, we don't really have this explicit taboo. However, we do have plenty of cases where contactees and abductees accept food. To use sort of a thumbnail sketch, generally speaking, abductees have a negative experience, and thus the sort of foods that they consume fall along those parameters. You have unpleasant tasting foods forcibly administered versus the contact reward, which is the term that I generally use for people who have had pleasurable experiences or pleasant experiences, who are given tasty food and are given tasty food completely voluntary, continue their own free will. So even though we don't have the food taboo, consider this one interesting tale from the Komsomolets Kubani newspaper, which is an Eastern European newspaper. I know that there's some problems in general with Eastern European news sources. Sometimes they can be a bit sensational, but I still found this to be really, really compelling. Ivan Martinovich, in the late 90s, was actually approached on the street by a tall, gray-skinned entity and immediately taken into its craft. He was shown a life review. And according to Martinovich, was taken to the entity's home planet. While there, he marveled because all these entities would eat would be milk and vegetables. And he actually asked the entity, "May I please eat some of your food?" And he was told that no, you cannot, because it will alter you forever and you will be forced to stay with us. So after being shown a quick warning of all the apocalyptic imagery that might befall us, he was unceremoniously dumped back in his home. So there's this great quote from Bart Goldfinger, James Bond film, that says that once is happenstance, Mr. Bond, twice is coincidence, and 3 times is enemy action. That's sort of the way that I feel about this. There are far too many similarities and far too many consistencies between these particular subjects to just write it off. What's interesting to me, what really made me think that this was worth investigating, in addition to these consistencies, is the fact that many of these experiences, even though sometimes they do take a long time, are often brief, and they're so brief that you wouldn't have to necessarily administer food or drink to the person that you're taking if you're a fairy or an alien or a Sasquatch. I mean, generally speaking, I've heard survival experts talk about the rule of 4, which means 4 minutes without air, 4 weeks without food, and, 4 minutes without air, 4 days without water, and 4 weeks without food. So obviously this isn't really done to really administer any sort of nurturing effect. So we have to talk about something, this sort of fairy similarity, because I know that there are at least some people in the room who hear fairies and they think it's sort of a goofy term. If you think about the Disney Tinkerbell sort of idea. That's not reality. It's really interesting. When you look at the fairy lore worldwide, elemental spirits that are held in sort of this animist worldview, it becomes very clear that they come in all shapes and sizes. Short, hairless, large-eyed fairies, tall, hairy fairies, such as the woodwoes of Celtic lore, which really does map onto the Sasquatch concept quite well. And in that case, it seems like perhaps there might be something valid in this. And my interest has always been in the work of Jean Follet, who pointed out some really good similarities between fairy lore and alien lore. You can even see it sort of in these two illustrations. I mean, it's not that far removed. So some people might not appreciate the fact that I'm really approaching these things as possibly different sides to the same phenomenon, but at the same time, if you're being intellectually honest, you have to acknowledge that there are some definite similarities. I'm not saying that aliens are fairies, I'm not saying that fairies are aliens, I'm saying that there is some intelligence that, if not the same intelligence, definitely uses similar methods to accomplish its means. What are the similarities between fairy lore and alien lore? Well, we have short entities supervised by a taller figure. This is one of the things that really surprised me. We're going to talk about one of those cases in a little bit. But oftentimes in abduction lore, you have people taken by short figures, and they'll be a taller, much taller, gray, sort of apparently in a supervisory position. You find this in fairy lore as well, where people will actually encounter a bunch of short fairies, and there'll be a taller woman who's sort of guiding their actions. Changelings. In fairy lore, it was not uncommon for fairies to abduct children, often infants, and replace them with a sickly fairy baby. I don't think that anybody here is unfamiliar with the fact that, according to modern abduction lore, it is not at all uncommon to find people who claim to have missing fetuses, and also to sort of tie to the hybridization idea. Crop circles versus fairy rings. Pretty self-explanatory. Yesterday's fairy ring is today's crop circle. Fairy rings can also apply not only to circles in wheat, but also sometimes applied to circles of mushrooms you can find, sort of on the side. But that's pretty self-explanatory. Missing time is one of the biggest similarities people have noticed. We're all familiar with Lynn Hopkins' simple work by the same name. A lot of times abductees will realize that they are missing large chunks of their day, and will only then later realize that that's the first tip that something anomalous happening. Similarly, people would go into fairyland for a day and emerge years later, or go into fairyland for years and emerge a day later. Another similarity, which bears suggesting, also crosses over with Sasquatch. Strange lights. Self-explanatory in UFO abduction lore. Perhaps a little bit less explanatory in fairy lore, but oftentimes when someone's walking through the British Isles and they saw lights in the distance, they would say, oh, those are the fairy lights, those are the lights of the Fae. Sasquatch researchers are finally coming around to admitting that certain areas that are Sasquatch heavy, they often see anomalous lights. And I really have to applaud that community for doing it, because they certainly have admired the material for quite some time. So the fact that they can actually openly admit that, I think, is a positive sign. Elaborate taxonomies. This is something that I always give a chuckle to. I mentioned fairies coming in various shapes and sizes. It's ridiculous. Each country probably has 3 or 4 different fae types, and they look super different. You know, the tall, hairy ones, the short ones, and the middle ones. And it kind of sounds like Pokemon after a while, because you've got all these different entities that want different things. Similarly, in abduction lore, we hear tales of, as Rosemary pointed out the other day, we have energy beings, we have insectoids, we have reptilians, we have greys, we have Nordics, we have all sorts of things. If you go one farther into the pre-1950s lore, it even gets kind of goofier, to be honest. And believe it or not, some Sasquatch researchers are saying that we have ape-like Sasquatch, and we have human-like Sasquatch. And you know those dogmen people are seeing? Well, they're actually Sasquatch that sort of look like baboons. Which, again, is keeping with this theme of these elaborate taxonomies. Reproductive interest. We mentioned changelings, we mentioned fetuses. Many of the tales of Sasquatch abduction are purportedly for procreation with women. A lot of native livestock mutilation. All 3 of these fine gentlemen have been accused of livestock mutilation in varying degrees. Obviously, we think mostly about aliens, but that's also happening in fairy and Sasquatch tales. Paralysis, I love this one. If you were fairy struck, that meant that you couldn't move. Again, that charming Irish way sometimes means that you just have a little bit too much drink. But that also comes through with alien lore. You'll have aliens who extend wands often and will end up paralyzing a witness. In the Sasquatch community, you have people saying that infrasound will actually end up seizing a victim up. Infrasound is a proven thing. It's subsonic frequencies that actually end up sort of superseding your locomotion. It's been shown to be employed by tigers. But again, the central theme is the same, this concept of paralysis. And then lastly, the food taboo. So that's why I tend to try to lump things together. My particular interest is in trying to get to the heart of this paranormal idea. So where does the food taboo come from? Well, most anthropologists will point to the story of Demeter. Persephone. Persephone was the daughter of Demeter. She was actually abducted to hell, to the underworld, by Hades. Zeus dispatched Hermes to come fetch her, but when he did, Hades actually slipped her a cursed pomegranate seed, and just before emerging from the underworld, Persephone consumed the pomegranate seed and was cursed to remain in the underworld forever, only emerging once a year. So this is a fine explanation. I don't disagree that this is probably where a lot of this comes from. And I think that it's very reasonable to assume that this particular myth could have sort of expanded across the Eurasian continent, as it were. Greece, that's fine, cool. It's a worldwide food taboo. So we have in Mesopotamia, the hero Adapa was actually refused food by the god Anu, because even though it would give him immortality, it would mean that he would have to stay in the land of the gods for the rest of his life. Jewish and Teutonic traditions have similar beliefs. In the Finnish epic, the Kalevala, there is a hero who is given a tankard of beer in the underworld and actually resists drinking it because he knows of the implications of that. Hey, too far. Showed my hand there. In Japanese lore, the goddess Izanami actually died, as I guess goddesses can, and was actually taken to the underworld. And even though she could have returned being a goddess, she was given food after dying and was cursed to remain in the underworld forever. Now this is all fine and good, because as you can see, this is all relatively close, relatively connected. I'm a big fan of Hancockian diffusionism. I'm a big fan of that sort of thing. But if you look closer at other parts of the country, you see similar motifs. In South America, shamans say that if you visit the land of the dead and are given chicha, which is sort of black corn beer, that you should only have a mouthful and not finish the other thing, because, everybody say with me, you'll be stuck there, right? We see in New Caledonia that some traditions say that the newly deceased cannot be revived if they eat in the spirit world. There's a similar tradition in Maori folklore of New Zealand that says that if a lover wants to visit their deceased loved one, they actually can visit them as long as they don't consume any of the food that is put out for them, because otherwise, again, they'll have to stay there. And then again, as mentioned, there's a handful of cultures in North America, native cultures that have similar beliefs. There's an Apache belief, that Apache story that even though these two young warriors went to the land of the spirits and ate their food, when they returned they couldn't eat mortal food. You'll find this belief in Haida Ascension, a lot of Alaska lore, but you also find it in Pawnee, Cherokee lore as well. It's become sort of a pop culture myth. I'm sure that some of the people here have seen Guillermo del Toro's film Pan's Labyrinth, in which the fawn warns Ophelia that she should not visit, when she does visit the pale man, the god who got the eyeballs in his hands, that if she eats any food from there, it's going to be bad business. So again, diffusionism sounds great. But when I think of the idea of a worldwide culture sharing information in antiquity, I don't normally think of deep-seated spiritual, cultural norms being shared. I normally think of resources being shared, I think of technology being shared, perhaps even stories, but these beliefs are deeply held within the spiritual structure of a lot of these cultures. So to me, it suggests that something's happening with some archetypal level. Before discussing what appears to be given in these accounts, we first have to acknowledge what fairy food might be. This is a picture of a Dvora boy, not to be confused with the Dobo boy in Russian folklore, consuming an offering that was left out for it. Offerings were left out, have been historically left out for elemental spirits all across the world. Sometimes this was a very beneficial thing. Sometimes this meant that I give the fairies the brownies my milk, and that means that they'll help me with the harvest. But sometimes it's kind of like protection money. They're kind of sketchy. Sometimes it meant that I have to put something out for the fairies or else they're going to come in and wreck my household. What's interesting with this particular motif is that you see it nowadays in Sasquatch lore. I don't use the word pejoratively. There's an objective reality to all of this. But you'll find people who are quote-unquote habituators, who claim that they can leave out offerings and acclimate a Sasquatch to their presence, and the Sasquatch will come and take these certain offerings. You leave out the wrong offering, the Sasquatch will be very angry. The exact same things happen with fairies. I mentioned the elaborate taxonomy of fairy folk. Well, they wanted specific things. You know, there was an Italian fairy that only wanted macaroni. Pisties and pixies in Welsh folklore would often specifically want milk. There's a great account of some cats drinking the milk that the pisties apparently had wanted to accept as their offering, and the cats got very sick. And this ties into another concept, which is this idea of poison, the idea that these entities are taking the essence of the food while not taking the food. The term for that is poison. There's another Welsh term that I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce. Probably sounds like Kahdava, but it's a really interesting idea. I find it, my inner skeptic says that this is most likely because it's easy to write off that these entities took the essence of the food, because the next morning you're probably going to find whatever you left out there still. But there are interesting accounts where cats have drunk the milk that's supposedly been deprived of its essence and get sick. Similarly, there are plenty of stories of cats and outside animals who will drink their own milk but will avoid that, which is a nice little interesting parallel to the livestock mutilation, where oftentimes scavengers will avoid the mutilated remains of certain livestock. So what is this? So if they eat essence, then what do they give people? Well, the answer is kind of nothing. We find time and again this concept that fairy food given by the faithful, is nothing but detritus. It's leaves and twigs and bark cloaked in this aura of glamour. There's a famous story of a Welsh saint by the name of Saint Colin, who in the 7th century was actually hoping to parley with the king of the fairies. Once he saw the food, he said, "I do not eat the leaves of the tree." It's a little bit melodramatic. But nonetheless, he claimed that he could see through this glamour. It was nothing but leaves. An interesting parallel, returning once again to the bookless folklore. We have these stories that if you were to be given food by the bookless, you would be trapped with them. What was this food that it gave? Well, it was apparently dried salmon. But if you actually took a closer look, it was nothing but tree bark. So get this idea that somehow these entities are able to obscure what they're giving us. Even more recent, Kuala Lumpur, In January 1982, a young man by the name of Abdul Muttalib disappeared. Even though he was never found, the locals claimed that it was part of a recurring series of abductions by elemental spirits that they referred to as the Boonie. They also claimed that whenever the Boonie would appear and take someone, they sometimes brought the person back, and the person would talk of seeing these wonderful, sumptuous feasts, and eating those feasts in these wonderful palaces, but oftentimes the abductees would come back, vomit up grass and worms. So get this idea that whatever is being given to you is not at all tangible. I want to ask everybody to remember, I don't know if I said this, but when Joe Simonson was given his pancakes, he said that they tasted awful because they were tasteless. Another little similarity there. So does this happen in the UFO era? Well, some people have said that it doesn't. It's more common to contact reports. Nick Pope said that he did not feel that this food trend actually ever appeared in modern UFO lore, and I must strongly disagree. It's sort of a weird position with somebody who's been in this field very long. But I have to strongly disagree. At the very least, if you look at certain lore, you find that this is a recurring theme. And if you really take the balanced approach that I would advise as seeing the UFO as constantly recontextualizing itself, think about the airship wave of the late 19th, early 20th century, think of the flying saucers of the 50s, think of the black triangles today, the phenomena constantly reevaluates itself. If human technology is X, then UFO technology is X plus 1. If you think about it in terms of that, it's very easy to say that injections and ointments and pills are all part of the same trend. They're substances administered to some effect. And again, that's not even counting cases that literally include actual food. Now, just to be clear, I would love for a UFO to land outside of that wonderful Egyptian pageantry that we have in the movie here. I would love for the Sasquatch of Arendelle Mills to walk through the room right now. I would love all that to happen, for it to be flesh and blood and nuts and bolts. But A, if I'm being honest, I can't accept that, and B, really it doesn't seem that way. It doesn't seem like this is a materialist viewpoint. There's something going on. And again, what I'm very fond of saying is, if it's not multiple sides of the same thing, it's similar things using similar methods. My particular point of interest is where the Venn diagrams touch. So what trends do we notice, taken in aggregate with these three different phenomena? Well, that's not the slide that I thought I had, so I'm going to have to pack it up with it. What does stuck in fairyland mean, right? Because if you are stuck in fairyland, if you consume food from the fairies and you are stuck, how does anybody ever tell stories? Well, as we've seen, there's certainly stories where people come back and have not consumed, but there are actually plenty of stories where people have consumed food in Sasquatch lore, in fairy lore, in alien lore, and all these different aspects. So what does this mean? Well, perhaps it means a personal change. Perhaps it means that someone is forever altered by the experience. You know, I recall the Apache tale that I told of the young man who ate the spirit food and came back and couldn't eat food. You can't go home again. Home is someplace where you started. You can't return to the way things were. In some cases, this is actually meant insanity. The story of the Elamaids of Denmark, I believe, supposedly would give wine to people on the road. They would drink the wine, and when they returned home, they were driven so mad by the wine and by the maiden's beauty that they actually ended up going insane, in some cases killing themselves. And again, we can't disavow the fact that perhaps this means lifelong experience. Now, another quick caveat, I actually talked to the Georgia chapter of MUFON, and I had a lady who was an experiencer sitting in the front row, and she goes, I've had all sorts of experiences, and this has never happened to me. And I said to her, which I didn't say to her because I thought of it later, but I would have said to her that I've been driving cars for 17 years and I've never had a blowout. It doesn't mean that doesn't happen. So again, this isn't suggesting that this sort of thing happens in every encounter, but perhaps it is part of the methods which these entities might use to their end, to their own personal goals. Now, here we go, the trends. In literally about 60% of the cases that I found, it's liquids. He said drinking is water. Liquids, all the time. Very, 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 very common. Roughly divided into 3 groups: unidentifiable liquids, some sort of meal or drink, sometimes juice, sometimes milk. Alcohol is not that common. You will find alcohol in ales in medieval pageantry with fairies with relative frequency, but you've got to consider the role that water played in those times. Water was kind of a sketchy deal. You wanted to make sure that it was actually purified in some sense. Most medieval cultures actually take a good amount of their hydration through the consumption of ale, which was generally weaker than we are drinking today at So again, alien abduction lore. Lots of times people are forced drinks, contact lore. Lots of times people are given drinks. One of my favorite stories is the story of Orfeo Angelucci, who wrote 2 books. Oh man, is it Some of the Flying Saucers? Patrick, help me out here. Some of the Saucers, something. He wrote 2 books. I used to know them all the time. Anybody? No? Okay. He was an abductee who basically wrote 2 books, and like a quarter of what he wrote is this ode to this wonderful nectar that he drank. My good friend Greg Bishop talked with Nick Redfern about the possibility that this was actually sort of a psyop, that some sort of government agent had actually slipped Angelucci some LSD. But anyway, in any case, looking at it on its face, it's this ode to drink. So you see drink a lot. You see fruits and vegetables, sometimes unidentifiable, but the weird thing is sometimes not. Sometimes people are like, they gave me a coconut, they gave me a melon, they gave me some sort of strawberry. I mean, it's just really strange that aliens would, come to Earth and pick strawberries and then dole them out. You also find grain. You'll find rice. You'll find crackers. You'll find wafers, often of the buckwheat or barley variety. And again, these are trends that you see across all 3 different subsets of entities. So to illustrate this, this is the snapshot of a snapshot of my work, but to give you an idea of some of the cases that we have encountered. There's a story of a gentleman in 1987, a hunter named Kevin, who repeated all of his testimony without the use of hypnotic regression. Had stopped to use the bathroom, which is a nice way of saying that you want to be on the side of the road, off of the North Canal Road near Macpass, Canada, when he spotted this flying saucer in the distance of his mouth. This is the spot where Kevin had his encounter. Unfortunately, that's not the flying saucer I had to bring to people. But he saw this saucer, and the next thing he knows, he hears something behind him, and he sees these charming blokes. Look at those guys. That's some nice style. I like that. 2 mantis-headed aliens that he says end up freezing him. And while he's frozen, they zap him again, and the next thing he realizes, they're gone. Completely just vanished out of thin air. So, I gotta admire the guy. He continues to his hunting cabin. He spends a really sleepless night in his trailer, but he recalls later, not immediately, but later, he recalls in the middle of the night coming conscious in front of a gray alien. And being familiar with the abduction pageantry, which we have been so familiar with in culture nowadays, he asked the entity if it was going to experiment on it, and he said, it's already happened. And now, I want to give you this. And he gives Kevin a glass, a clear glass, that's 3/4 of the way full with this amber color. And he asks why. He says, well, you need to forget. He says, I don't want to forget this. This is awesome. And they say, no, you have to forget for your own good. So he drinks just 2 or 3 sips. And apparently it works for a while, he forgets. This is a theme that you hear time and again of this concept that this food will often bookend an encounter. So even though he drank and returned from fairyland or UFO land or spirit land, whatever you want to call it, even though he drank and returned, the experience was somehow ended by it. You'll find this a lot where the experience is bookended by food or drink. Either it comes at the beginning. Most commonly, people are given some sort of food or drink right before being released. Some scoop marks that Kevin had in his hands as well. So, subset, juice. Sorry, that's not a better screenshot. This is from a wonderful French documentary on the beliefs of different cultures in Ireland. If you just Google ghosts, fairies, lake monsters. Sorry, Iceland. If you just Google that, it'll probably come up. Audra Goodman's daughter, a 9-year-old in 2002, said that she was playing amongst some boulders, another common place where the fairies were supposedly known to inhabit, when she fell, and out of one of the boulders emerged a short entity that ended up taking her inside the boulder. A lot of times in Icelandic lore, people believe that the Hula folk, the hidden folk, the fairies, lived inside boulders. And inside she was given a spiral cake and some funny banana juice. I've never had banana juice, so I'm not sure. It's neither here nor there. Arve Jakobsen in 1984, November, was given a raspberry-like juice by an entity. Jakobsen claimed that in Skotland, Norway, this entity entered his home and actually took him aboard his mothership, showed him some interior pyramids and this lush garden. And whenever his spirit flagged, whenever he got tired, he was given this rejuvenating raspberry juice. And again, just scratching the surface on this motif. The subset, as I mentioned earlier, is milk. Oh, and mine's cut off. Still read it. Obviously, very common to favor. There's a story of a banshee who met a young man on the road at night and offered him some buttermilk. Knowing the food taboo, he turned her down, but was actually struck blind the next day, which is kind of a bitchy thing to do. Because you're damned if you do it, you're damned if you don't, I guess. But it was very common for fairies to offer milk. Similarly, it's very common for fairies to steal milk. There's another great encounter of a farmhand in Scandinavia who was found missing and actually entered the barn, and apparently one of the taller elven fairies had him suckling at her breast, and he lived out the rest of his days as a duller. Compare that to tales of Sasquatch that often will administer milk to people. There's a story from the year 1200s in Siena, Spain, where supposedly a serrana, a wild woman, actually took an infant and had it suckle at her breast. In more modern encounters, there's some apocryphal stories from a newspaper in India that claims that a man was abducted by Yeti and forcibly breastfed, and claimed that the taste of the milk was sour with a little bit of bitterness, which sounds totally appetizing. As you can see, it's not an uncommon motif, since I was able to find this after Googling for 30 seconds. And then Whitley Strieber. Some people in here probably don't like Whitley's work. I have mixed feelings about it. I would largely characterize myself as a Whitley Strieber apologist. I think that something definitely happened to this gentleman. I think that a lot of his writings, whether or not they are objectively factual, still can help us get deeper and gain some greater insight. Whitley famously in communion, or maybe not famously, in communion he actually consumed some drops of something that he claimed tasted like a rotten pomegranate. He later reevaluated this taste to be a rotten fig. But more prominently in the key, he was approached by an entity in a hotel room, I believe, who gave him a lot of New Age information. And before it departed, actually left a tall glass of a milky white substance on his bathroom counter, which sounds really sketchy when you think about it. But I mean, I think there's perhaps some symbolism at play. I'm not actually not being pithy with that. I think that symbolism is important in these encounters. But having said that, Strieber claimed to have drunk this, and he forgot some of the encounter. Strieber actually equated this particular beverage to nepenthe, which was, in some cultures, the drink that would give you blissful oblivion. Sometimes when you died, before you were reincarnated, you had to drink nepenthe before going into your newer life because of the learning fruit. So continuing on the Strieber kick, into the communion letters, he actually published some correspondence from someone who claimed to have been taken to a planet filled with alien graves and given a pomegranate. Pomegranate, interesting, Persephone, right? And they ate the pomegranate, and the Grey told them to scatter the seeds wherever they would. Again, interesting that this dovetails with the Persephone myth. Also interesting that the pomegranate in Zoroastrian tradition was considered a holy fruit because of its evergreen status. But my favorite story, possibly my favorite story involving any of this. Oh, I should have put a shadow line or something. It's hard to read. My inner graphic designer is getting mad at me. The story of the fairy dwelling on Selena Moore. According to this story, this legend, a Mr. Noy was walking to a tavern to procure some drink for the evening. Again, this motif of going to get drinks. When he found himself in a part of the countryside that he did not recognize at all. And Noy found himself in an orchard, a sumptuous fairy banquet. And they're all eating and drinking, and this taller woman, again, the taller entity, the taller woman, approaches Noy and says, "Stay here, I'll give you a flagon of ale." And as she departs, Noy is taken around the back of the building by this woman. After a moment, he realizes that it's Grace Hutchins, not Cutchin, Hutchins. A former lover, who he presumed was dead. Grace tells him that actually she had done exactly what he had did. She had stumbled upon this fairy banquet, found herself in the orchard, was hungry, and took a golden plum from the orchard. And when she consumed it, it turned bitter in her mouth. Another interesting corollary with Whitley's work. Whitley said it was a bitter, decaying pomegranate, bitter taste in his mouth. And she said that gave the fairies permission to do with her as they would. What they actually did was they replaced her body with a changeling, that's what was buried, and they kept her in fairyland. She also told Noy that their food was a sham. They only ate, again, detritus, and that, I love this so much, that they weren't Christians, they were star worshippers. That's what she told Noy. So Noy, being a compassionate guy, wanted to rescue his ex-lover. So what he did is he turned his glove inside out and threw it on the ground. That sounds sort of silly. But it's this concept of reversing the order of things. It's the concept of being able to gain, to emerge from fairyland by doing something nonsensical. I think it's really interesting. I just put this together like 2 months ago, and I'm like, I should have said something about that. What did a lot of abductees report? That when they're returned, their clothes are sometimes inside out. That was an interesting parallel. But he blacks out as soon as he does this, and he is found in a barn 3 days later, without any memory until later of this experience. The last of the main three categories is bread. We've already mentioned the Simonton anecdote. But there's a great story from Ivan Anfilov, who says that in August 1953, a lady by the name of Lina Ivanova Kravets allegedly met three 11-foot-tall, three-eyed extraterrestrials in Shtanivka, Ukraine. They claimed to be on a rescue mission. They actually went to her house, they discussed science and spirituality, and before they left her, they gave her a small piece of bread about the size of an acorn. She cracked it open and saw that there was something dark inside, kind of sketch, and decided not to eat this particular bread. What I find really interesting about that is, if she had been an Irishman walking to a pub and met an alien, and was given a pill, how would she have qualified that? Would it have been a fairy giving her a wafer? Similarly, today, if you meet an extraterrestrial who gives you a pill, that's such a good metaphor. Similarly, today, if you met a fairy who gave you a wafer, would you, in terms of your cultural context, qualify that as an extraterrestrial with a pill? So the idea is that cultural context really does color a lot of these experiences. So again, we have these similarities. What is noticeably absent? Meat. We are obsessed with meat in the Western world. Every meal revolves around meat, yet you don't see it. So if it's purely a psychological phenomenon, you would think this would happen. When you do see meat, it's rarely beef. It's mostly fish of some sort. There's some older contactee stories where steak is offered, but I can literally count on 2 hands the number of times that I found meat in my serve. Candy. There's one other thing that Western culture is obsessed with, it's sugar. You don't see it that often. Again, probably less than 2 hands that I could count where actually I've found candy in these accounts. Not saying it doesn't happen, but saying that it definitely is not that common, not as common as other things. So what's so what, right? It doesn't matter unless you can put some sort of analytical theory to it. Well, keeping with the trend of the weekend, the Vedas. If you look at these foods, they roughly correspond to a lacto-vegetarian diet. Lacto-vegetarian diets have a lot of their roots in India, but what's interesting to me is that it's not only a lacto-vegetarian diet, it really corresponds in terms of the frequency. If you map frequency to the importance, placed on certain foods in a particular diet, it corresponds to the sattvic diet. Now, in order to explain this, I have to sort of go through a little bit of Ayurvedic healing knowledge. The sattvic diet is based on the concept that everything in the universe is embodied with 3 gunas. Good, bad, and middle, basically, is what it amounts to. Similar to the yin and the yang, there's a little bit of one and the other. Everything has all 3. Some of them have a certain guna in more prominence. The first of the gunas is tamas. It's associated with lethargy. It's negative, it's dark. The next one is rajas, which isn't as bad because we all need a little bit of rajas in our lives. It's associated with passion, egotism, and the drive to do things. According to Ayurvedic cuisine, you should never eat tamasic foods, but you need a little bit of rajasic foods to stay alive. And lastly, sattvic foods, or this concept of sattva, which is the association of purity and balance and order. The term guna actually means the tricolor gray. It's referring to the fact that all different things have these qualities. And of course, these foods are associated with certain things as well. Tamasic foods, consumption of these will make you pessimistic, lazy, and negatively affect your health. Rajasic foods will move you to action, again, passion and egotism. Sattvic foods will make you peaceful and serene, and put you in good health. Now again, the reason that this corresponds to the sattvic diet, and not just a general active vegetarian diet, is the emphasis put on things, right? We have sweet fruits and their juices. The most sattvic food, according to Ayurvedic, deceased Ayurvedic scholar Harish Johari, is fruit juices. The next is milk, which is most sattvic when it's been just removed from livestock. As you see, it goes down into grains as well, especially barley. Barley is a very common fairy grain. So again, we're faced with this question. So what? Well, like it or not, there's something consciousness related to all this. There's something, not to use the term pejoratively, there's something New Age about the abduction phenomenon. The sattvic diet was the diet preferred by seers and mystics, and actually its consumption would help you obtain those states with greater regularity. Famously, not a lot of people talk about this. I don't think a lot of people know it. But Betty Hill claimed throughout her life to have had dreams that accurately predicted car accidents with friends. So there definitely is there's some sort of consciousness-based element to this. More specific to the subject at hand, in the 1977 Elaine Avis abduction, she and her husband were taken aboard a craft, given some sort of, well, a few instances of a peppermint-like candy. And when she returned, they eschewed alcohol, preservatives, meat, artificial sweeteners, all these things, they were removed from their diet. Which is interesting because they basically adopted a sattvic diet after their encounter. Similarly, when people would be taken to fairyland, they would, sometimes they would come back and they wouldn't actually suffer any adverse effects from being gone for so long until they ate something, until they ate a common earthly meal, and then they would crumble into dust. There are a couple of stories about some of the worst that happens here. Thomas Bullard, Eddie Bullard, in his 1977 UFO Abductions, The Measure of a Mystery, noted that extrasensory experiences, including clairvoyance, precognitions, and visions of the future, happened in 20 of the 270 cases he had reviewed. And I believe at that time was probably the most comprehensive study of the abduction phenomenon. So, what other things are there to consider? There's a lot. And again, this is just a sort of a tiny slice, not even sort of the direction that I've gone with my research. It's a nice jumping off point, but there are some other things to consider. If you look at the one-way transmission, entity food to us, you have to look at the other end, right? Offerings of food to entities, theft by entities. This is something that's also common. You also have to look at entity food and sleep paralysis. Is there any sort of correlation there? As well as entity food and sexuality. You know, you can't talk about any of this stuff without talking about sex, because I think I said this last night, although it's a little bit hazy. But the three things that a lot of people have trouble talking about are UFOs, sex, and death, right? There are other alternative substances. There's a very prominent motif of ointments being placed on abductees and facilitating some sort of reaction. And then again, at the last, you have to talk about vintages, which is something that, coming into this, I didn't think that I would have any interest in. Because like a lot of people out there in the real world, I just wrote off psychedelics as being something that people didn't have too much time on their hands, but that's very much not the case. You've got to put 180 on my views on that. And entheogens in a lot of cultures are foods given to us from the gods. So it's one of the examples. Besides sardines, pancakes, is something we can actually study in depth. So yeah, I don't think this particular topic is at all an open shut case. I think there's plenty more to talk about. I was stunned to know that Rosemary included the offerings of food and drink in her drink counter. So that's something else that I look forward to looking into. Yeah, so that's about it.